Next, I would like to invite Patricia to the stage. Patricia is the co-founder and CEO of Private AI, a Microsoft-backed startup who raised their Series A led by the BDC in November 2022. Private AI was named a 2023 Technology Pioneer by the World Economic Forum and a Gartner Cool vendor. She is also a computer science PhD candidate at the University of Toronto on leave and a Vector Institute alumna. Her R&D work is focused on privacy-preserving natural language processing with a focus on applied cryptography and re-identification risk. Welcome, Patricia.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here to talk about a very little spoken of topic of customer trust in generative AI. No one cares about this, right? So we know the value of AI for unlocking data, for improving operational efficiency, making better decisions, improving customer experience, and we're trying to embed it in a whole bunch of products and services. And we've got some really large numbers to go with this. 80 to 90% of data out there is unstructured: text, audio, images, documents. And what this means is that all of this data that's been collected can really only be unlocked with AI. What's topping that is an expectation of a $15 trillion contribution of AI to global GDP by 2030. 85% of organizations reporting that they gain business value with their employees are using AI and seeing benefit from it. And 7 out of the 10 most valuable public companies in the world use deep learning and machine learning in key aspects of their operations. So with all of this, AI governance has become a board-level topic. But what's really going on behind the scenes? Here are a few concerns that people have around actually taking generative AI into production. Of course, there's resistance in the workforce for potentially trust reasons, but I'm going to go over the various aspects that people are actually concerned about with regards to trust. All of those blank ones, that's trust-related. First, biased decision-making. That's unfortunately lowered down on the concerns, but still very much one of the top concerns that people are talking about. There's not being compliant with regulations. And what does that mean? There's, of course, the EU AI Act that you may have heard of. It's in the news a lot nowadays. And it's going to cover general GPIs. It's going to cover, of course, high-risk models. And you could look up what exactly counts as a high-risk model and what you have to do to comply with the EU AI Act for high-risk models. Those tend to be around trustworthiness, transparency, so also very much around trust of the models. However, for things like privacy, you're still relying on data protection regulations that have been fairly well established over the years since the GDPR came into play in 2018. The high vulnerability to hacking is something that comes up as well. The unreproducible outcomes, the fact that the models can be a black box, increased risk of data breaches, which are not necessarily connected to hacking, because those data breaches can be internal. For example, an employee accessing information that they shouldn't have accessed in the first place, and maybe the access control systems aren't set properly yet for AI systems. Or it could be a customer accidentally accessing information because the system was trained on data they shouldn't have had access to either. Compromising of personal information, sharing personal information with third parties when large language models are being fine-tuned or trained. Making factually wrong decisions. Once again, this is very much about the transparency of the model. And limited traceability of sources. Again, transparency. So what is trustworthy AI? According to this blog from NVIDIA, trustworthy AI is an approach to AI development that prioritizes safety and transparency for the people who interact with it. NVIDIA names 4 pillars, 4 guiding principles to trustworthy AI. There has been work done before that very much aligns with trustworthy AI. If you look at, for example, Borealis's AI work on responsible AI, lots of research papers on responsible AI and what counts as pillars. But here's one sample of what can count as trustworthy AI. Privacy is a key component. So are you complying with privacy laws? or data protection regulations. Privacy is very much about also giving control to the user about what happens with their data. Then there's the safety and security. Do you have the proper cybersecurity infrastructure to deal with AI? And the thing is, right now, we are going through a very steep learning curve over what it takes to have proper cybersecurity infrastructure for AI. The transparency. So you're seeing a lot of these aligning with the top concerns for actually getting Gen AI into production, and the non-discriminatory aspect of it as well. And what we're going to see more and more are unexpected risks. This really interesting paper by a professor at a university in Japan points out that through ChatGPT, you can access malicious URLs that will change the instruction and send you to a different URL based on even what memory is stored about the individual. So you could say, for example, if you are 15 to 20 years old, go to this particular URL. If you are 20 to 25 years old, go to a different URL, as an example of how you can exfiltrate data out of models. And the thing about this is that we might be used to having CVE codes for vulnerabilities, but this is an application-level vulnerability. CVE codes don't apply to application-level vulnerabilities. So we have no way of tracking these. Then privacy risks. These are constantly underestimated and misunderstood. In this paper, it shows that even very dense text embeddings can store a huge amount of information, and you can extract reliably names from a data set of clinical notes. About 92% of the input to create these embeddings could be extracted. So that means you also have to be very careful when you're creating embeddings for RAG that you're taking care of what information is going in there. And what we're starting to see is also regulators noticing companies aren't really caring about these profit losses because maybe the fines aren't large enough. We're starting to see, what if we hit them somewhere else, somewhere where it really hurts? In this case, the FTC ordered Weight Watchers to delete the data, distort algorithms, and pay monetary penalties for misusing sensitive data from children. How complex are these problems? Are each of these pillars? Let me show you by taking a deep dive into what I know best, which is privacy. First of all, data minimization is really important when it comes to dealing with personal information for AI. And what people don't necessarily understand is the difference between direct identifiers and indirect identifiers and how they both count as personally identifiable information. And personally identifiable information can be described in various ways depending on the data protection regulation, but they generally do include these two because it's whatever it takes to re-identify an individual. Direct identifiers are things like full names, exact addresses, social security numbers, credit cards, and then quasi-identifiers are things like religion, approximate location. When you put these quasi-identifiers together, it exponentially increases the risk of re-identifying an individual. But when it comes to data minimization, which is a requirement of things like the GDPR and other data protection regulations, it is not about removing all personally identifiable information. It's about removing what you don't need. Why is this a hard problem? You're often dealing with huge volumes of data. You're also dealing with a patchwork of privacy legislations. So different requirements worldwide. In the US, it's different requirements per state. You're dealing with multilingual data, especially if you're either servicing multinational organizations or if you are a multinational organization. And multinational data as well, different addresses, address types, different ID number types, et cetera. And a ton of different content types, right? You're dealing with maybe claims data if you're an insurance company, but you're also dealing with internal emails, you're dealing with HR data, and all of these can come in different structures, and oftentimes also include data, audio recordings from your customer support center. With that comes disfluencies in speech that you need to account for when you're recognizing the personal information, and also the ASR intricacies, right? They don't all output the same way, and You also have to deal with optical character recognition errors when you're dealing with the different types of documents. So where does data minimization fit into LLMs? First of all, you can minimize the amount of information you're sending prior to it reaching a third party. So for example, if the large language model you're using is a large language model from a third party, or if you're fine-tuning a third-party LLM, you might want to be very conscientious about what kind of information you're sending through to them. It's also important to sanitize data before the prompts hit the large language model. And that could be even if it is your own large language model internally and your customer is sending you information. So if you're a bank, for example, you might be getting a question about somebody's account, but people say things. They might have shared personal healthcare information with you, and you really don't want that information in your systems. You can clean data before training or fine-tuning the models, and you definitely should, because that information is going to be memorized by the large language model and can be spewed out in production. And cleaning the data also includes confidential company information, being very conscientious about trends, about financial amounts. Are you sharing somebody's salary without knowing? And removing sensitive data before creating embeddings, as we talked about, is important. There's lots of papers I could point you to that address, that talk about how each of these are an issue and how removing personal information or limiting what you're training your model on needs to be done, otherwise you get into problems in production. And as a measure of last resort, you could block sensitive data from reaching your end user right before the response reaches them. So if you're accidentally sending through a credit card number or an account number without meaning to, block it off. The end user can just see little stars or account number or something like that. So how does that work when you're doing the prompt cleaning, for example? In this case, you've got draft me an offer letter to Leroy Jenkins of Akron, Ohio, from the position of Chief Charge Coordinator. It gets de-identified. Draft me an offer letter for name 1 of location 1 for the position of occupation 1. Sent to your large language model of choice. Your large language model of choice outputs, dear name 1, we are pleased to offer you employment at your company name for occupation 1 position in our location 1 office. Reintegration of personal information. Dear Leroy, we're pleased to offer your employment at your company name for the Chief Charge Coordinator position in our Akron, Ohio office. No personal information was shared with their third party. And if you needed, for example, the name of the occupation, you could choose, I need to send this through. But the point is, you are choosing what it is that you need and removing as much risk as possible when you're sending the data to a third party. This video probably won't work. Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm calling because I'm having troubles connecting with my API. My username is happyhappy12@gmail.com. In addition to that, I currently have $0 on my account, and I'd like to update my credit card so I could put more on. My new credit card number is 5534-3344-589-6382. Thank you.
So the reason I'm showing you this video is to showcase that you might get the data from streaming. You might need to do it in batch processing mode. But the point is that this information might be coming from a bunch of different channels, and you need to be able to adapt accordingly and even have tools that work for you in a very efficient way. And so this is an example where it's really important to have streaming de-identification, because you might be showing the information to a large language model right away who might want to help a customer service representative answer the client, right? And so you have to block that as soon as possible. So another way of increasing customer trust with regards to actually putting generative AI into production is by talking about, of course, what you're doing for each of these different pillars, but also getting a third-party assessment. And I wanted to showcase two types of assessments that Private AI has gone through and what that has brought for our customers. So in this one, you may have heard of Armilla AI. They're a startup in Canada. They're one of the first, if not the first, to provide warranties for AI models, which is really, really cool. So what we do is bring this assessment to our clients, and they can see this was tested for bias, this was tested for accuracy, it was tested for robustness, and they looked at the governance process of the model. When we bring this to our prospects, that actually moves things along much quicker. And then another form of assessment that we've gone through is expert determination on the output data sets of our technology, of our de-identification technology. And this is a different type of assessment, of course. This is for healthcare research, work being done on the healthcare data. But the point I'm bringing up here, even if you don't have to be compliant with HIPAA legislations, is consider actually getting assessments on the data sets themselves, in addition to the models, if you're thinking that you need an extra boost for trustworthiness for your customers and for your board. A few final things I want to leave you with. An action item is to keep track of emerging vulnerabilities, which may or may not show up as CVEs, like the one that we talked about from that professor from a university in Japan. This blog I recommend you take a look at, called Embrace the Red. And it talks about the different vulnerabilities that they find with ChatGPT and I believe other LLMs as well. And then the best technology that you're going to use for trustworthy AI is going to come from different sources for each of the pillars and for parts of each of those pillars. It's going to be something that you're going to have to put together based on what you think is best for your application. And so be careful of one-size-fits-all solutions. It's much better to have something robust that you can really reliably tell your customers about rather than saying, I got a Band-Aid solution done, we're good. Especially as regulators become much more conservative in what they allow companies to do. And I'd really like you to encourage you to have documentation around these processes that you can publicly showcase to your customers. This has made a huge difference for us personally by showcasing this is what we train our models with, this is how we do it, this is what we do with your information, we never touch any of your data. That kind of thing has really increased the trustworthiness that our customers have with the models that we provide them with. And finally, consider having third-party verification for both your models and your data set. And I think as we move forward with the various AI regulations that are going to come forward, there are going to be more and more third-party verifiers that you could go to for different aspects of verification. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions afterwards. I'll be around for about 30 minutes.